politics and conflict transformation and peace building, gender activism and gender justice, sexuality, and putting the issues and concerns of the LGBTIQ community on the table, the oil and gas industry, and the importance of working on geopolitics. Their work has highlighted the essential role women can play when given a seat, actually extracting a seat on the decision-making table, when reclaiming their voices, and when fighting till the last breath for what they believe in. I will start by introducing our speakers. Zahra Lanri. Zahra is a Libyan peace activist and member of the legal committee at the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. She is an expert on gender, conflict resolution, and peace building. She's a strategist, academic, and researcher specialized in prevention and countering violent extremism, women, peace, and security, as well as mediation and national dialogues. She is also co-founder and CEO of the Libyan Women's Platform for Peace, which is a socio-political movement focused on peace building, inclusivity, and gender equality. Her research interests include gender, peace building, conflict resolution, Islamic history, philosophy, and metaphysics. Ahlan Zahra. Muzen Hassan is an Egyptian women's rights campaigner, the founder of Nazra for Feminist Studies. She took part in the protests of the Egyptian Revolution of 2011 and worked to help those who were sexually assaulted at the time. Since then, she successfully campaigned for changes to be made to the Constitution of Egypt and sexual crime laws to safeguard women. She engaged in coalitions of women's groups who successfully lobbied for the inclusion of women's rights in Egypt's 2014 constitution and ensured the passage of amendments to the Egyptian Penal Code to include sexual harassment and expand the definition of sexual crime. She also organizes an annual feminist school that introduces young men and women to gender issues. Muzen was awarded the Global Fund for Women's inaugural Charlotte Bunch Human Rights Award in 2013. She also receives the Rights Livelihood Award, known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize in 2016. She is currently subject to a travel ban and asset freeze by the Egyptian government for allegedly violating foreign funding laws. Ahlan Muzen. Diana Abu Abbas. Diana is the executive director at Marsa Sexual Health Center in Beirut, Lebanon. She has grown as a person and as a professional along with Marsa since 2011. Diana is an advocate for sexual and reproductive health and rights, LGBTIQ and women's rights. She graduated from LAU with a degree in communication arts and has invested her passion for media and communications in Marsa's advocacy campaigns. We're proud to consider Diana as a partner and as a graduate. Ahlan Diana. Lori is an oil and gas governance and geopolitics expert. She's the Middle East and North Africa Director at the National Resource Governance Institute, NRGI, and independent international nonprofit organization that provides policy advice and advocacy infused with lessons learned in the field and with insight developed through rigorous research. She represents NRGI in the region and she oversees the implementation of programs and projects. She played a leading role in the establishment of the MENA Oil and Gas Knowledge Hub in Lebanon in 2014. She has several publications on oil and gas in Lebanon and the East Med. She teaches a part-time course on geopolitics of oil and gas in the Middle East at the American University of Beirut and AUB, and Lori is also a graduate of LAU and is a close friend of the Institute as well. So I will start, first of all, by thanking Zahra for being with us at such a busy moment in time for her. Zahra is currently in Tunisia taking part in a 3-day meeting of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum, and she's part of the legal committee. And this meeting is facilitated by the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, working to follow up on the progress of the constitutional process and finalizing discussions that will pave the way for national elections on 24 December 2021. This is in Libya. Given your work and advocacy, given your work in general, Zahra, and the advocacy campaigns that you've led for electoral system reforms in Libya, and because you are engaged in critical deliberations to move the elections and the preparations for that forward, we need your insights on the importance of women's political participation in Libya and them having a seat on the decision-making table in light of the recently formed government with significant women's representation, as we might well know, 5 women ministers who hold some of them hold key positions such as foreign affairs and justice portfolio. So Zahra, you have 10 minutes, the floor is yours, especially that you're in the midst of these discussions. So we need you to tell our students what's happening and why your role is important. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for this opportunity. Thank you for the Lebanese American University for having me. I insist that women politicians or on the table have to link their work with a civic engagement, with civil society, with academia. It's important. It's important. This is the style of women on the table. We do believe in inclusive participatory approach. So that's why I am keen to be, though I am at the lobby at the moment, outside the room, but I am keen to shed some light on the process, on the role of women, because I think that's part of what we do, is the link. It's not the insistence on transparency, the insistence on communicating with civil society, with society in general, with academia, and building partnerships with them. It's not an easy thing, but I think that it has been a decade now. We have made a lot of progress. Usually, I think, Mariam, we have, in many panelists before, I used to be critical of the role of the engagement of women in the region when it comes to peace processes. As I used to say, that women used to be in corridors. Like we see with all due respect, in some countries like Syria, having an advisory, a women part of the advisory board, like in Yemen. The women in Yemen played earlier a significant role being part of the national dialogue. Before in Libya in 2015, there were only 2 women who participated in track 1. However, there was a track called women's track. So it was mainly to tick the box and to say that we have women in the peace process. But it matters a lot, where are these women located, and do they have an equal voice, or are we just ticking the box? Is it quantitative, cosmetic representation, or is it an effective representation? And so bringing a qualified, strong, vocal woman to the table, regardless of their political background, social background, ethnic, cultural background, is important. And that's why I would say, I would move to the other point, which is so the first point is the importance of having women in the first track. Second point is the qualitative rather than the quantitative representation of women. Definitely the quantitative is important. This time we have 22 women, almost 18%, or 22 actually percent of the dialogue are representative of women. But they are, this time, and I've been participating since 2013, but this time, though we were different, we managed to create a critical block, because women on the table are vocal, are strong, have a vision. So that's why it takes me to the third point. What is the role? I started by that the way we do things is different. We tend to link with society, engage with, focus on strategic communication, insist on having transparency, on the participatory approach. Yes, but the most important thing I would say, and what I have been framing lately, our participation in the process as being one that disrupts the narrative. I think what women can bring to the table by gendering the process is not condoning or submitting to the rule of game that already a male political elite has imposed on our societies, whether it's in Libya, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria. We see a kind of a formula that is designed, that is centered around the idea of sharing of power sharing. And the power sharing is not between these elite, political elites and their society, but it's rather between it's amongst the corrupt political elite and reproducing the kleptocrats, those who live by being in such political positions and making money out of this, making money out of their political offices, making money out of the status quo. So the most important thing is that we disrupt this narrative. We do not submit by the rules of the game that is set by the international community and in order to appease our political elites. So this is the one thing, that we do not accept this and disrupt this. The other thing is disrupt and making design the process, or propose to redesign the process, that it is more centered, that is more people centered, that it does not only talk about how they are going to share power among themselves, but how are the political elites are going to share responsibilities. How are they going to address their responsibilities and be accountable to their people when it comes to social and economic rights, especially at the time when as the wake of COVID-19, and we're seeing the collapse of our systems. So the issue of corruption is an important thing. And I might conclude that we maybe not, I'm sure that not many of you have heard, exposing corruption, making sure that there is transparency, there's a proper vetting process, that we ourselves reclaim the place, reclaim the whole process, the national ownership of it, have a shadow parallel process, pressure the UN itself when they are not doing their role, they're not they're not doing their role properly. In our case, there was serious allegations of buying votes, and there was claimed a corruption in the process. Women were whistleblowers, exposed it, have it for the very first time in the history of UN-led peace process documented, and that will make us later on to think of preventive measures to create preventive measures for anti-corruption in whether it's in peace processes or elections. So I think when we talk about gendering peace process, I rather say gendering the peace process rather than saying the role of women, because it's not only about women, because building partnerships with youth, with other men who believe in the same agenda, which enshrines gender equality, which enshrines human rights, is important. So it's not about human rights. It's not about any kind of participation. It's about effective participation. It's also about protection of women who dare to be vocal and speak to authority their rights, their visions, their vision and their opinions. The other thing is prevention. How can we create preventive measures for anti-corruption? The last thing is how can we think of, these are basically, I'm talking about addressing the 4 pillars of WPS. How can we, which Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which is participation, prevention, protection, and then finally recovery, and the issue of how to rebuild our societies, recover our societies from conflict, and make our peace processes more centered around economic and human rights, economic and social rights. So that's basically it. It's not women's participation only. It's rather gendering the process through these main pillars that I just mentioned, by being vocal, by being by being aware of our role in disrupting the narrative of the male corrupt political elite in our societies. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry to improvise. I'm just speaking.
No, not at all, not at all. This is really very, very interesting. And of course, in terms of being vocal, we all know how vocal you are in general. And I personally think the fact that you're there and other women who are holders of a feminist agenda, of course, men and women maybe who are holders of a feminist agenda, will allow this process to be gendered, as you say. And with you there, I think we can rest assured that I think things will fall into place, and we hope everything goes well with you. I understand if you need to leave. I will move on to our next speaker. Unfortunately, our students, I will share with them your email in case anyone has any pressing questions they'd like to ask you. Zahra, we really appreciate the fact that you took the time to be with us. Good luck.
Listen to Muzn and all the other panelists. I miss you all, and I'm sorry that I can't be with you in the Q&A session. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Zahra. Thank you so much.
Good prayers. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck. Okay, so that was interesting. Especially, we wanted her experience from the field. She's actually located in the meeting. Muzn, so we will continue with you. So Nazra for feminist studies. I'm going to talk a bit about Nazra, Muzn, and move to basically ask you the specific question I want to. So Nazra for Feminist Studies work on producing knowledge on women and gender rights. It works on policies and legal reforms from a feminist perspective, launches campaigns, provides opportunities for networking among young feminist groups, very important, in order to contribute to the continuity and the decentralization of the feminist movement. You work on art for activism, engaging young men and women in order to mainstream feminist consciousness and culture. You provide psychological, legal, medical support to women survivors of sexual violence in the public sphere. You support bodily safety and freedoms from a gender perspective, and you support women human rights defenders through providing legal, psychological, and medical aid. On this point, Muzn, we are interested in hearing more about the work that you do to counter the backlash against human rights defenders, and recount to our students your personal reflections on how you experience this backlash, and why are you still adamant on fighting despite all the threats and the hurdles, and why it's important to fight back and refuse to be silenced. Muzn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you for the LAU. And honestly, I'm always, as an Egyptian feminist, always thankful all the time for the Lebanese human rights and feminist community, that they were always welcoming us as Egyptian feminists, and they are the place for us for many times, especially in the time when things has been closing in Egypt. So I really saw this support and solidarity from the Lebanese feminists. Yeah, the feminists in Lebanon generally, and the Lebanese organization like LAU. And one of the things that we have been, yeah, when I met Miriam the first time, we were those young feminists who have been invited by the LAU to speak about our process in combating sexual violence in Egypt, in the constitutional process. So it was, yani, it was one of the things that we are always thinking and remembering how you were always in solidarity with us. And this is one of the things which brings me to the speak about the movement itself. I do think that one of the things Nazra has been working on for years before the revolution, after the revolution, that our centered from the beginning was about building and continue building this movement. And I think this center which makes our work relevant to other things. So we were, yani, it's not about history, but it is about history. When we began as a group thinking about Nazra in 2005 in Egypt, in the time that things were not, we were in this time that people mainly locally, regionally, internationally loved this co-option of the feminist movement. They love that either it's purely a state thing, so we were the feminists who are a pro so-called Mubarak regime or the state, or even disconnecting the legal processes of changing in Egypt out of the movement and the people, as if it's not the work of local groups, or being co-opted by certain political groups or certain, not generations, more than this attitudes of conservative attitudes towards what's movement and what's feminist, or are we accepted to say that we are feminist or not? I remember at this time we were part of this generation which was changing in Egypt in a thing, and this is one of the eye-opening about the personal and political. It's about how independent feminist movement is really growing within a building of a public sphere. So thinking all the time that we could be co-opted is not the way. I think, even if not about personal feeling as feminists, even being strategic, and I think the feminist movement is a political movement, so we have to think strategically, that we have to think about this engagement with the public, because the public doesn't mean those male conservative people or patriarchal people who are even could be in the frame of being women, but it is about connecting to the reality of the Egyptian society. Uh, and at this time, we were in this, that we want to reclaim the narrative of the feminist movement. So we decided to have a group and then an organized organization, named it as a feminist organization. We have been struggling for 1.5 years with the institution, and honestly, many of the people within our community, that why you are naming it a feminist group. It's a bad word. People will not accept you. But honestly, we wanted to reclaim this because uh, because I do think that this is part of the identity. It is the identity. And it is about how we are seeing the public sphere. And honestly, for all of these years, I'm always proud that I'm a feminist, and I'm an Egyptian feminist, honestly, especially by seeing those younger generation. And when the revolution came, even if it's not a political discussion about the revolution, it's about things has been happening, and honestly it happened, that things has been changed, that all the people you have been searching for, they are in the public sphere. And this was the decision from Nazra and us, that we will respond to what's really existing. So this is what's happening now, that really Egyptian women, men, LGBTIQ people are refusing the status quo and the social contract of accepting violence against their bodies. So this is something so centered, and even if by putting pressure on organizations like us, on persons like me, but at the same time, the movement is continuing, because it is not only about one suspect and about one group. So we have been finding this until in the last year, We have been finding different younger women and men who have been speaking up about sexual violence in certain places, which people were so stereotyped that as if upper class women don't have the right to be speaking up against their sexual violence, or people from other classes, because class is not being upper or low. It's about this differentiation of being in different classes. But with all of these things and being always proud of being an Egyptian feminist, we have also to understand that, and I think this, what I have been learning, Yani, and educating and training myself all these years, that we are not those victims or survivors for the people to understand that we exist. And honestly, what's happening in Egypt is really heartbreaking, because closing the spaces for all those younger generation, or having all this backlash and targeting against them because they just wanted to enter and experience the public sphere, is something so hard. And you can see it within this public and private, state and non-state. Having lots of those women human rights defenders who are in jail now. And I know that I'm emotionally involved because many of them are my friends. But seeing and want to have the narrative about violence against women in Egypt without remembering all the time that from a year and a half, Isra Abdel Fattah has been kidnapped and she was tortured. But we want to be selective about speaking about violence against women because this is something safe in some people. It is really not only unfair, it's not giving the right image about how we have been facing this multiple layers, how those women who are coming from this class and this community of the American University in Cairo or other so-called upper class women have been speaking about this serial rapists who have been raping them in a serial and horrible way, and people have been in a state and non-state have been accusing and discussing as if they have the right to speak about their sexualities, is something not giving the right thing about what's happening. Because this is one of the things, combating violence against women is not about that we love the survivors, it's about that it is the right of the survivors to really survive, but at the same time to have their rights. But this is the things I think we are living in Egypt. We have been in Egypt from 2018. There is really an extension of targeting women in the public sphere. So we have women who have been in jail, kidnapped, disappeared in a larger number than before. We are an organization which is documenting this from 2011, and it is crossing different political or non-political views, but also the target of so-called civic groups or civic women human rights defenders. For me, they are the women human rights defenders because they are speaking about women human rights issues and human rights issues as civic people like Isra Abdel Fattah, Khulud Said, Sulafa Magdi, and that not only the time within the COVID what they are facing, but also the type of their jailing is something, yani, not only not acceptable, but you couldn't see the vision out of it, how this state and regime has been targeted women who have been speaking or singing through TikTok just because they are destroying the Egyptian family values. This is something really outrageous that you are thinking about people like this, or even when so-called the Fairmont case or the big case of the serial rapist happens, how the societal and the state response on it was about that, no, she doesn't look like a good person, or as if the values of the survivors is the main issue about this. So I think it's important now to focus on different things in Egypt. One of the things that having younger generations who are speaking up, it's a reality. Having Egyptian women and LGBTIQ people refusing this status quo and they are refusing the social contract that people used to have. It's also something in reality, but those people couldn't continue like this without having a real public sphere uh, for them safety and security. In addition to that, I do think that it's important to look in this country as part of a region, which how we are so proud to see what Zahra has been speaking of, about how Diana and other groups in this region and in Lebanon after the plus, how they are struggling to this. So this kind of solidarity which we are in this region, this what can make people survive within this context. And this is one of the things why I'm continuing, because I really feel the solidarity.
Thank you so much, Mozen. This is really inspiring, especially your hope despite all the setbacks. And so now we will move to Diana. Diana, hi again. So Diana, Marsa is a sexual health center based in Beirut. It operates as an NGO, as we said, since 2011. It provides confidential and anonymous services related to sexual and reproductive health, and all services are provided to all in a friendly environment, free of stigma and discrimination against age, sex, gender, and sexual orientation. So, Diana, based on all your work and the groundbreaking work that you do, we need to hear more about the work that you do in advocating for the rights of the LGBTIQ community, the challenges you encounter, and you are now encountering in specific in light of working in Lebanon after the blast, in light of a global pandemic, the economic crisis that has been detrimental to everything related to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So can you recount to our students your personal reflections from the field, because they're very interested in learning more about this. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm gonna start by giving like a bit of my own personal narrative from the time I was a student at LEU, and I'm gonna speak a bit about what's been going on within the LGBT movement until the current day. So when I joined LEU, I was 17, and I remember walking through the upper gate and seeing all the weird looks that I used to get from the students there. And I went back to university a few years ago, and I had the same looks from different people. So I understand how it's like to see yourself change, but at the same time, for people to see you in the same way, despite the fact that it was 15 years later from the first time you entered that space. So it was quite eye-opening for me, because it made me see that even though time passes, you cannot allow yourself to satisfy the norms of society and prioritize them over your own well-being. So from this standpoint, I would like to share with the students today. I would like to ask them that if you feel you are different and you feel that the world is very difficult, and when you feel down, don't let it get to you. It's okay to feel down and come back up, bounce back, and continue the fight you want to do, because there's a lot that's worth living for it. And despite all the hardship that you can encounter, better days will come, especially during the current times when I know it's very difficult to pay for your tuition and it's very difficult to have any aspirations in Lebanon, but always keep hoping for the best. So when it comes to the LGBT movement in Lebanon, we started online through the internet and through organizing with a bunch of strangers that you didn't know before. It developed into a social movement. We started meeting each other, and then it became a political movement that is organized. So from then on, there was the formation of Club Free, which is an activist group that was working for LGBT rights. And later on, it was developed into Hilm organization that is still present today. Funnily enough, Hilm still has a pending status as an organization. It's not fully recognized as an NGO, so it's not registered, At the same time, there was no objection from the government to have it registered as an NGO. So they are somewhere in between. And that's been the case for 10 years. So here you can see the legal loopholes that can leave you hanging in the void when you can't get registered and get access to proper funding. At the same time, they are not completely oppressing you as a movement because they didn't object to your existence. Since then, we've seen society change when it comes to its perception of LGBT individuals. And we have seen the work go through phases. We know that when Hilm organization started, we saw some difference in the way things worked with the police. For example, we saw a reduction in the number of raids that used to happen to LGBT-friendly places. And we saw that some organizations started working on training the police forces to become more, I'm not going to say friendly, but less oppressive, I would say. And there was a lot of work done on this aspect. I think over the last few years, we have seen a regression in the support of the LGBT rights in Lebanon. As you know, with the pushback against freedom of expression since 2016 against activists, regardless of their affiliation, this oppression has also impacted the LGBT community. It started in 2017 when the law enforcement stopped the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia event. And then again, we had to cancel it and we had to meet urgently, and the event was held online, which brought us a lot more viewership than it would have in person. And as you know now, all the online and digital events are bringing in much more access to people, especially if you're afraid to be out in a space. It allows you to participate freely. And I was an activist with a queer underground group before I joined MADSA. The discussion has changed over time, and in MADSA we try to instill the feminist values and ideology within the core of the work that our organization was doing, especially when it comes to intersectionality, because as an organization that was started by Hilm organization. It was a small initiative before it became an independent organization to serve everyone, not just the LGBT community. And we started expanding the scope of the work we did to be inclusive of everyone, whether it's youth, young women, the LGBT community, refugees, and migrant workers. We believe that with intersectionality, we can together defy all the common oppression that we face. Over the past year, as you know, things have been deteriorating in regard to the economic crisis, and we have a lot of stigma and discrimination against the LGBT individuals in Lebanon on different levels, whether it's the educational level, the economic level, the medical level. We know that a lot of young LGBT individuals are kicked out of the house, especially when it comes to the transgender individuals who are more at risk than other people, because you can hide your sexuality, but you really cannot hide your gender identity. And they are also stigmatized within the LGBT community itself. So here we see that they lose access to education. In turn, they do not have as many work opportunities, and which reduces their income, which makes them more vulnerable. In the event they go to sex work that includes physical, verbal, and sexual violence. We also know that a lot of healthcare practitioners do not have the proper skills to treat LGBTIQ individuals, whether it's the communication skills that they lack or the actual medical skills, since through a study we did, we saw that the medical curricula lacks a lot of information when it comes to harm reduction and to sex and sexuality. So given all of this, since COVID started last year, we know that a lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of people were confined within the walls of their families, and they had to return to homes or be locked up in homes that are violent and are not understanding of their difference, to say, quote unquote. And we have seen a rise in gender-based violence among the LGBT community, the same as we have seen in domestic violence when it comes to women and young girls. And all of this was exacerbated by the Beirut blast. During April last year, we started coordinating with our partners as MADSA. We started coordinating to see how we can support when it comes to food aid and hygiene aid. And we became a small coalition. It was formed organically. And we started receiving grants and coordinating together. After the Beirut blast, this small coalition grew. We became more organized and we called it the Yalla Care Coalition. And it's an initiative to push people to donate so that we can support the LGBT community. And also it included older people and refugees as well. This work has been going on for 1 year, and we are working with Haven for Artists, the Arab Foundation for Freedoms and Equality, Labmash, and I'm sure I forgot someone, Sandra from Posh, the nightclub, and other individuals as well. So after the blast, we supported these individuals with coverage to have shelter, to pay their rent, and to have aid. And we are trying our best to coordinate together to create a system that can support them and provide aid for them until this crisis ends. I'm going to stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Diana. And we will move now to Lori. I'm sure students have a lot of questions to ask you all. So let's move on. Lori. So as we all know, actually, the field of oil and gas is dominated by men, and you are a regional expert in this field. So we would like you to recount to our students the gendered implications related to working in this field and your personal reflections on the challenges you faced. In addition, on the level of Lebanon, there has been a lot of hype related to the demarcation of the maritime borders between our neighboring countries, and you were at the center of this debate. Your tweets triggered a lot of traction, and you managed to redirect attention to this portfolio. We would also like to hear from you your insights on the importance of women having a say, not just on the decision-making table in terms of politics, but also on the decision-making table in terms of issues related to geopolitics. Lori, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, the LAU, for inviting me. أنا كمان I'm an LAU graduate, and I graduated in 1997, يا Diana. So basically, so historically, I guess we all know that the oil and gas industry, so it was not a field that attracted women or easy for women to be part of. As you know, it requires a lot of field work, so you're away most of the time. It's a heavy-duty industry. You have to spend a lot of time away from your family, so on platforms, being it onshore, offshore, rough conditions, and even like if you go back in time, even like what they wear, where they sleep, what they eat, all of that made it like really not attractive for women to be part of this industry and of this sector. But at the same time, this industry was very attractive because you made a lot of money there, right? So it was an industry known for men and plus for making a lot of money. So, but by like with the evolution, if you want, and with the improvements that happened, women started kind of being more attracted to this field, but not as much as we expected or we wanted. So it became like a personal choice. It's something that you like and you want to be part of that. It's not that there was this really push to have more women into the industry, right? And when there was a push, it was only like a policy oriented and like it was a decision by the leader of a country or the or certain people to push for more women to have, and we ended up like having more women in the administrative role and not in the field. So currently we have like around like 15 to 20% of the workforce is women, and you always see that you see them in an administrative job. You see them less in STEM than in other kind of jobs. At the same time, with the evolution that happened, I think under the diversity umbrella, so companies needed to be more diverse and gender diversity came in. So how to attract more women, because we want to be as a company or as an industry known as to be diverse and being open for diversity. Under that, they started thinking about like a lot of improvement happened on the HR side. So flexible working hours, even like on the equipment, like what to wear. They started thinking, okay, the women wear different than men, so maybe the equipment need to be lighter, for instance, for women, etc. So all of that to attract women to be in the workforce of oil and gas, under the umbrella of diversity, because they wanted to be seen like these are, because they get more points, they get more they become more attractive. Shareholders might be very interested in investing in a company that is that cares for diversity, and gender diversity came in that sense. But with the evolution as well, I think the whole industry started its own evolution. So they were more jobs, more like different kind of jobs, more on robotics, digitalization, all of these improvements that we've seen in the oil and gas industry pushed more women to be attracted, because again, this is like less of a rough or heavy duty work. You can sit behind your computer and do some geological work. You can sit behind your computer doing some watching like the drilling happening, etc. All of that made like more women being interested. So but then the other problem was that at the beginning the oil and gas industry was seen as the company or the industry where you make a lot of money, and for a whole generation this was very interesting, and this was something that attracted them, men and women, to make more money. And then with all the shifts that happened, as I explained, under diversity, وبعدين all the evolution that happened on the oil and gas sector, we reached to a point where we expected that to have more women interested and more women wanting to join the industry. What happened, it's like there's a shift in generation, and the current generation actually is not interested in making money as much as they're interested in making a difference in this world. And the oil and gas sector suddenly has been seen as a polluting sector, as it's not gratifying. It's something that women don't want to be part of that. They prefer, and the new generation, men and women, but more for women, they're not interested in a sector that is polluting, that is against climate, and that is harming, and it's causing a lot of the problems that we're facing with climate change. So suddenly all the evolution that happened that should have encouraged the women to be part of that was stopped because of what women want in life. They want to make change. They want to be like a positive, they want to play a positive role in life. And this is where we've seen that they're not interested. So we thought that they might be interested in the renewables. So there are studies that had been happening around the renewable energy sector, because this is, again, like under the big umbrella of energy, the oil and gas from one side, and then the renewables from the other side. So from the renewable side, we saw that actually women are more, like we see more women involved in the renewable side. So you see 32%, the latest study that IRENA has done, 32% of the workforce in the renewable sector are women compared to the 20% in the oil and gas sector. But again, the same problem we're facing is like they're in the administrative jobs. So you see 45% of women holding administrative jobs, while 28% only related to STEM. So again, like we see that there is the same, it's the same issues that we were facing before in the oil and gas industry. We see it in the renewable side as well. So this is something to be continued, and I guess there will be a lot of studies to see why this is happening. But the last point on this, before talking, before like sharing a couple of thoughts on the delimitation and my role and the role of women in that, I think like what we're seeing, it's like in the oil and gas industry, you see like men are dominating, but at the same time, when you look at the other side, which is the NGO side, the NGOs that are dealing with the oil and gas sector, with energy sector, you see more women in that sector, more women dominating that field. So you see again, because from the NGO side, it's always seen like the NGOs, these are those who monitor the sector, those who want to do good, if it's environmental NGOs or other governance NGOs. So you see that these are like the good guys. So that's why you see more women wanting to be part of the oil and gas field, but from the other side, which is monitoring, holding accountable, environmental, etc., where you see more women involved than men. A couple of points on what you mentioned about the delimitation and women having a role in that, and the geopolitics. The issue is, it's very funny because already politics is seen that this is a man's field, and not everybody and they don't see it as a woman's field. And geopolitics the same. It talks about like, it sounds like geopolitics is only for men, or men can analyze better when it comes to geopolitics. And when you combine geopolitics and oil and gas, so this is like double like it's double no. Geopolitics is not for women, oil and gas is not for women. So what are you doing talking geopolitics of oil and gas? So it's a lot for men to take. So what we're seeing, for instance, like I've been talking a lot to media now recently with the delimitation, and before, like years before, when we were discussing the whole oil and gas sector in Lebanon. It's interesting, the mansplaining, the continuous mansplaining, because a lot of time I'm not a solo guest, you know, like I prefer to be a solo guest, but sometimes they feel that maybe I can't cover everything alone, so they need like to have a man with me on the show. So, and then you see it's so recurrent that you see men explaining the same ideas that I already explained, the same concepts that I already explained. The moment they take the microphone or they are asked to answer a question, they don't answer the question that they were asked. They want to repeat whatever I said, thinking that maybe I didn't explain it well, or maybe like if they explain it again, people will understand it. And this is recurrent, it's happening all the time. And worse than that, it's that when they start congratulating you, like, bravo, you did a good job in explaining, as if they need to give you the legitimacy and they need to give you the credibility that, yes, you can talk about these and what you said is right. When I start talking and I have another guest, the male guest, I never say that I congratulate you on what you said. I take it for granted that if he is part of the show or he is a part of a panel, it means that he knows what he's talking about, and he doesn't need me to enforce him or empower him of what he knows. But they do that. Men do that. They want to congratulate me, thinking that they are empowering me, thinking that they're giving me the legitimacy, or telling to the others, yes, you can hear her or you can listen to her because she knows what she's talking about. But he wants to give me that, and not for me. Like he doesn't want to get it as if like I am there because I deserve to be there. Maybe he thinks like she's there. I don't know why she's there. But then he congratulates you to tell you like, yes, you deserve your seat. And this is on a panel and on a TV show. So imagine what could happen if you are in a decision-making position where you are dictating what the policy should be or what the strategy would be. So this is really interesting what's happening, and it's happening like non-stop. So I'll stop there. I think these are like a couple of ideas that I had to share. But one thing that I guess like the other panelists have raised, it's the issue of narrative. So I heard imposing narrative, reclaiming narrative, setting the narrative, and this is very important, I guess, for us, definitely not to abide by the narrative that is set, and for us when we are in the whatever we are doing, to set our own narratives and to be really up to the level of being able to impose the narrative that we want to impose, and assume that and be responsible for what we are imposing on people and the narrative that we are imposing, and not to feel guilty or feel that we cannot do that. So that I think is very important for me, because I hear a lot of analysis sometimes that are not the right analysis, the wrong analysis. So you feel maybe sometimes that you are coming up with the narrative and you are imposing the narrative, you're repeating the narrative, and then you will like, it's really gratifying when you see that others are really picking up on that narrative and they are like using your narrative. So I think that is important as well. So I stop there.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, so I'm going to take some questions, and if there aren't any, I will recap what has been said. So let me see. The question is for Lori. Do women get paid as much as men in the oil and gas sector? Okay, another is complimenting us on the. So if you have any questions to the three panelists, please send them either in the chat or in the Q&A. Another question, you mentioned that women are not interested in a work that encourages pollution, but the inclusion of women does not change that. So this is another question to you, Lori. So I repeat, do women and men get paid equally? And women are not interested in a work that encourages pollution, but the inclusion of women does not change that. I didn't get the question. I don't know if you got it. Anyway.
But the idea is, we are saying that for a certain period of time, companies wanted to be more inclusive and under this diversity issue, like from women organizations pushing for diversity and pushing for companies to be more diverse and including more women. So they started thinking, how can we attract more women? How can we introduce incentives to attract more women? And this is what I was talking about. So they started like having easier HR policies, encouraging promotion, different kind of promotions. So you don't need to be traveling to a different country or staying for a long time to be able to get the promotion. So they started doing a lot to attract. But at the end, they found out that there is a more fundamental issue, which is like, women are not attracted to the oil and gas sector because they feel, and the younger generation actually, so it's a younger generation issue. So this current generation is not interested in working in the oil and gas field because they're not interested in making money as much as they're interested to have a positive impact or a positive role in the world. That's why this is another problem. So as much as they will change and evolve in their HR policies, or even like if the work will become easier for women and not the tough or the rough work, so it will continue not to attract women for different reasons this time, and not for the previous reasons.
Thank you, Lori. So, Diana, there's a question for you. Is there any way we can volunteer to help at Marsa? If yes, who do we contact? And one for Muzen. It was mentioned that in Egypt, there's an issue of viewing feminism, but aren't the youth trying to change that as well? This is not clear. An example I know of is Khatira on Instagram, who's an Egyptian feminist, I believe, and does certain awareness campaigns and videos about stigmatized issues. There's also a question, I will leave you all to answer them, Lori. What can be done on the level of universities to ameliorate the inclusion of women in the sector? So we will start with Diana. Who do they contact? How they can help out?
I mentioned the email in the chat box. You can see it. You
Perfect.
can just mention that you want to volunteer. It's visit us at marsa.me.
Okay, perfect. Muzn, I didn't get the question. I think there's a typo, but maybe they're asking about how the youth is dealing with everything. I don't think Khatira is Egyptian. It's a Lebanese initiative with by Amanda Abi Abdallah. I think started off with Womanity, and but anyway, Muzn, I leave the floor for you to answer.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
It was mentioned that in Egypt has the issue of viewing feminism. Sorry, do you mind, Rawan Hijazi, do you mind like resending the question? Lori, do you want to answer the question about how can we help ameliorate inclusion of women in the sector, so we can take out more questions for Diana? Okay.
And this is in general, or are we talking in Lebanon? But in general, I guess like the only way it's what we are seeing, it's like there are decisions taken by the authorities. Yeah, and for instance, the president or the sheikh or the prime minister decide that we want more women in the board. So it means that you have to get more women on the board. So then it becomes a decision by the authorities to have more women. And this is how, at the beginning, this is how it happens. So it's always like you need to push like through policy or through enforcing these things. It's like the quota. You impose it, then you have people, then you have women. Maybe the first round you'll have like not very, you will have women that you don't like, or they're not up to the level, up to the responsibility, or they don't have the standard that you want, and then it becomes better and better and better. So it takes time. So I think there is a policy issue, there is like a decision and the will issue that helps a lot. Definitely regulations and laws, of course, that if there are laws, so then you have to implement laws that would push for more women to be part of that. So it depends again on the objectives and what the country wants or what the companies want, and there are different ways to push for to help have more women, and definitely role models help. So in this case, Kamena, we have a graduate, yeah, LAU graduate who was really who works on a platform. So she's an engineer and she works on the platform, and she's been featured a lot, I guess, at LAU. So these role models as well help, and sharing their experiences help and encourage other women or young ladies who want, or young women who really want to be part of this. So this solidarity that would exist and sharing the experience would help as well. It encourages young women who want to be part of that world, because it's important to know what to expect.
Thank you, Lori. So Diana, when you recently came back to LAU, there's a question. You mentioned that you did not see any difference in perceptions towards you. What you just suggest needs to be done, bearing in mind, Diana, that we recently have now a Title IX office with an amazing director, Jennifer Schulte. So can you tell us what you suggest needs to be done? And to Muzn, so the question that was rephrased says that aren't the youth trying to change the negative views of feminism in Egypt now? So Diana, then Muzn.
Okay, I mentioned that what happened when I went through the Upper Gate and the business school recently, but I always felt at home at the Fine Arts building, where you see more diversity there and people are more accepting, which is a general notion within the arts. I don't know if you have a gender and sexuality club at LAU, but right now I know that the Arab Institute for Women launched Shabakat al-Mim, which is the network for the LGBTIQ community. Our partner as well. You have a lot of resources there, but I think to start at the basis, we need to have comprehensive sexuality education in schools. We already had programs that were developed, but they were rejected by the parents and by the teachers who felt too embarrassed to teach them. This is to tell you in brief, because we don't have much time. And I think we should keep talking about issues of sexuality and making it more public, especially when it comes to the more rigid schools like the business school, and where we don't have much diversity. So from this point of view, I think we should have more talks and more networking and more collaboration, where people would feel more comfortable to speak about themselves and would feel more welcome. And that is also accompanied by policies by the university that would encourage diversity.
Thank you, Diana. Muzel? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, what I
Okay.
understood that it's mainly about how the younger generation have been seeing and reclaiming feminism. But honestly, I found, being old enough, that I'm from this generation, which when I was me and only my friend calling ourselves feminists, and everyone is looking at us and saying that, you look like Nawal Saadawi. يعني but now seeing honestly younger generations who are calling themselves feminists, and honestly feminism became something cool in Egypt. And I have my niece, she's 15 years old, and I found she and her friends are wearing t-shirts called feminism, and this is by brands. And I find like, okay, we have been becoming so mainstream. But I do think this is one of what happened in the last 10 years, that how those younger generation have been using and understanding their bodily rights, and how it is also connecting to the sexuality and violence in this way. So I encourage everyone to see this part from Egypt, that when younger generation have been also using art to do this, and we in Nazra have been working on this with the younger generations, and it helped a lot. When we could use the first comic, feminist comic, when we had the public sphere, and the ability, while we were doing interactive theater performance, digital storytellings, all of these things allow the younger who are 18 and above to express themselves and seeing feminism as this personal and political thing. And because with all the experience we are hearing now, this is one of the things I always encourage younger people and students to see feminism in this as a journey, as between the personal and political. It's not about where you are working in, but it's about how you understand your abilities and existence, and the patriarchy and the multi-layers of existing as so-called a woman or queer within certain community, and continue as you like, because this is also about not re-stereotyping what's feminism. And this is something so important to be understood within the younger generation, and not to accompany them. They are the future anyway. So if we are not going with them, we will lose. It's not about them. They have their time.
Thank you, Muzen. I have two more questions, and I think maybe we will, if there are any pressing questions, please put them in the chat, because we're going to be ending soon. Diana, do you have attorneys supporting you to get legal status? This is for you. And Lori, like the inclusion of women is usually the solution for many social or economic problems. So maybe women can also diminish pollution by entering this business. Why aren't they interested? So Diana, then Lori.
No, we are registered as an organization. Marsa is registered. I was speaking about Hilm, who is not registered yet, and they do have the support of the Legal Agenda, which is also an NGO that works on legalities.
Lori?
I don't know why they're not interested. Like, I guess like everyone is interested in something. So no, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I guess I guess like, why was I interested, let's say, to work in this field? For instance, like, how did I end up in this? And then I ended up, definitely I didn't end up working in the oil and gas industry as much as in the oil and gas field. So and do the analysis, geopolitical analysis, working on the governance issues, on the on transparency, accountability, etc. So because I felt that this was through my journey of understanding what's happening to this region, why do we have all these problems in the region, and how can we fix the problems of the region? So it all started from my egocentric views of myself, of how can I save the Middle East. And I ended like every time like trying to understand like what are the problems, how I can solve these problems. And then I discovered that there is a big important aspect, which is the economic aspect. And in the Arab region, the oil and gas as a central focal point for the economies of the countries is leading sometimes to this lack of democracy, lack of freedom, etc. So I wanted to understand more about that field, to understand more like how I can help in really having a better Middle East, like a region where I would love to. I was born here and I want to die here. So I wanted to make it a better place. When I die, it would be a better place. So this is why I got interested. So I think like it depends like what are your interests and where you end up like working in the field, either in this field, either on the oil and gas platform, or like ending up like watching the government stealing the money and stopping them from stealing the money, or wanting to fight for democracy. So I'm sure I didn't answer the question.
It doesn't matter. So I think I'm gonna have to end here, except if there are more questions. So I just want to reiterate how it's important to have vocal figures like yourself. Power is off. Sorry. Let's hope I can still talk. Yes, I can still talk. So how important it is for us to have like vocal figures who do not shy away from talking about these issues, irrespective if they are under travel ban or they are threatened, or irrespective if they're talking about portfolios that are not in sync with what society likes. So we don't need to tick the boxes anymore. We shouldn't be playing the gender card. We need to have effective representation, as Zahra said. We need to disrupt the narrative. We cannot shut up. We need to get rid of corrupt political elites everywhere, especially in Lebanon. There should be no compromise. We need to redesign the process. It should be more us reclaiming the space to build partnerships, and that's why we have all of you here. We need to build the movement, counter the co-optation of the movement and the feminist movement in specific, give voices to young people, basically also reclaim the narrative and create a space for young activists. We need to support those who are not given a voice. And I remember very well in a conference whereby Muzen was supposed to attend with us on women, peace and security. She was not allowed to travel. We had her on video when it was still not en vogue to have people on video. Diana mentioned the importance of social media, the importance of being vocal on social media, showcasing issues related to the LGBTIQ community on social media, the importance of safe spaces, the importance of solidarity, knowing one's history, writing one's history, Diana, and this is, I will pester you on that, the importance of writing the history, documenting the history, the importance of not hiding one's sexuality, imposing different narratives on people, allowing them to accept the other. This is what we're trying to do here. We're an educational institute, especially with Shabakat al-Mim and with our Office of Title IX, not shying away from discussing all issues that are supposedly taboo. This is what we try to do, a fight for in a field that is not expecting females to be there, work on renewables maybe to sustain the environment, because this is very gendered. We need to sustain the environment, refuse mansplaining, refuse any sort of interruptions on the level of public speaking, and fighting back. Of course, we know how vocal you are, being all vocal in terms of like encouraging women to join the STEM fields and not to shy away from working on everything related to STEM and working in fields that are not basically feminine, or trying to break all the cycle, break the expectations of what society wants from us. We at the Arab Institute for Women are always here to have these conversations, to introduce our students to alternative platforms, to alternative people, not to mainstream people who have boring things to say. But anyway, that's why we try as much as we can to bridge academia and activism, so that we just don't publish research, but also we work on like molding the research and using the research to try and influence policy, to try and push for activism, And I was very happy to hear all your discussions. And I really want to thank Zahra because she took the time out of her very busy, of course, all of you, Akid, because you're all busy, but Zahra in specific, because she was in the midst of these talks, and the discussions that she relayed to us were discussions based on the talks that she had in those closed doors. Please always fight. Don't shy away from fighting, and we're here to support you. Thank you all for being with us. I hope our students enjoyed this food for thought, and we will definitely host more of these talks with you. And I hope our students would maybe volunteer, either Muzen or Lori virtually, or Diana physically. They would come to Marsa and help you out. Thank you all for being here, and good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.